3 drunk men cornered her in the rain, thinking she was helpless. But when she fought back with everything she had, a mysterious billionaire stepped out of the shadows and said 5 words that changed everything. The rain came down hard that night, turning the street into a river of broken light and shadows. Thorne Calloway pushed open the door of the small grocery store, her arms aching from the weight of the boxes she'd been stacking all day. Her shift had run 3 hours over because someone hadn't shown up again, and her manager, a man who seemed to enjoy watching her struggle, had simply shrugged and told her to handle it. She was exhausted, the kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes every step feel like you're walking through wet cement. She locked the door behind her, testing it twice because the lock had been broken for weeks and the owner refused to fix it. Her hands were shaking, not from the cold, though the November air bit through her thin jacket like needles. She was shaking because she knew what was waiting at home, another stack of bills she couldn't pay, another notice taped to her door, another night of choosing between heat and food. Thorne pulled her jacket tighter and started down the sidewalk. The street was empty except for the distant sound of traffic and the hiss of rain hitting concrete. She kept her head down, counting her steps the way she used to count sheep as a child. 1 foot in front of the other. That's all she had to do. Just get home, lock the door, survive another day. She didn't see them until it was too late. 3 men stumbled out from the alley between the closed hardware store and the old laundromat. She could smell the alcohol before she even saw their faces, sharp and sour, mixing with cigarette smoke and something else she couldn't name. Fear shot through her chest like ice water. She tried to step around them to move faster, but one of them lurched into her path. "Hey!" he slurred, his eyes glassy and unfocused. "Where you going so fast?" Thorne didn't answer. She'd learned a long time ago that engaging with men like this only made things worse. She tried to step to the side, but another one moved to block her. He was taller, with a crooked smile that made her stomach turn. "We're talking to you," he said, and his voice had an edge to it now, something mean hiding under the false friendliness. "I just want to go home," Thorne said quietly. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Please move." The third man, shorter but wider, laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Please," he mocked. She said please. They moved closer, forming a loose circle around her. The rain kept falling, soaking through her clothes, but she barely felt it now. All she could feel was the panic rising in her chest, threatening to choke her. She looked around desperately, but the street was empty. No cars, no open businesses. Just her and these 3 men in the rain. "Look," she said, forcing her voice to stay steady even though every part of her wanted to scream. "I don't want any trouble. I have nothing worth taking." "Who said anything about taking?" the tall one said, and he reached out to touch her arm. That's when something inside Thorne snapped. Not broke, snapped. Like a wire pulled too tight for too long. She'd spent her whole life being pushed around. Being told she wasn't good enough, smart enough, strong enough. She'd lost her parents in a car accident when she was 19. She'd dropped out of college to pay for the funeral. She'd worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over her head in the apartment so small she could touch both walls from the center of the room. She'd been stepped on and overlooked and dismissed so many times she'd lost count. But not tonight. Not anymore. She knocked his hand away hard, the slap of skin on skin cutting through the sound of the rain. "Don't touch me," she said, and her voice was different now, harder, colder. The man's face twisted with anger. "You little—" He grabbed for her again, but Thorne was already moving. She drove her knee up as hard as she could, catching him somewhere soft. He made a sound like all the air had been punched out of him and stumbled back, doubling over. The shorter man lunged at her from the side, but she spun away, and her grocery store keys, clutched between her fingers like claws, raked across his face. He screamed, hands flying to his cheek. The third man, the one who'd spoken first, seemed more sober now, more focused. He came at her with purpose, grabbing her by the shoulders and slamming her back against the brick wall of the building. Her head cracked against the stone and stars exploded across her vision. She tasted blood. Her knees wanted to buckle, but she forced them to hold. She brought her hands up and drove her thumbs toward his eyes. He jerked back just in time, cursing, and she used the space to slam her forehead into his nose. The crunch was sickening, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. She pushed him away and ran. Her legs felt like rubber and her head was spinning, but she ran anyway. Behind her, she could hear them shouting, could hear footsteps splashing through puddles. They were coming after her. She turned the corner, gasping for air, her lungs burning. There was a park up ahead, dark and empty, and beyond that, more streets. If she could just get to somewhere with lights, with people, maybe she'd be safe. She pushed harder, ignoring the pain screaming through her body, but then her foot caught on something, a crack in the sidewalk, a piece of broken concrete, and she went down hard. Her hands hit the ground first, skin tearing open on the rough surface. She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Everything hurt. Everything was spinning. She heard them getting closer, heard their ragged breathing and their angry voices. Tears mixed with rain on her face. But she wasn't crying from fear anymore. She was crying from rage, from frustration, from the sheer unfairness of it all. She'd fought so hard. She'd done everything right. And still, here she was, face down on the ground, about to lose everything. Then she heard a car engine. At first, it was just a distant hum, barely audible over the rain and her own ragged breathing. But it got louder, closer. Tires screeched as the car came around the corner, and suddenly the street was flooded with light. Bright, blinding light that made the three men freeze in their tracks. A car door opened and closed. Footsteps approached, calm, measured, nothing like the frantic stumbling of the drunk men. Thorne tried to lift her head, tried to see who it was, but her vision was blurred and her head felt like it was full of cotton. "Gentlemen," a voice said. It was a man's voice, deep and smooth and carrying the kind of authority that made people listen without question. "I suggest you leave, now." "This ain't your business," one of the men said, but his voice had lost its confidence. "I'm making it my business," the man replied. There was no anger in his tone, no threat, just absolute certainty. "You have 10 seconds to be out of my sight. After that, I call the police. And trust me when I say they will arrive very quickly." There was a pause. Thorne could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut. Then she heard footsteps, running this time, fading into the distance as the three men scattered like rats. The man knelt down beside her. She could see him now, or at least the outline of him. Expensive suit, dark hair, a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. His eyes were the most striking thing about him. Pale gray, like winter sky, and impossibly focused. "Are you hurt?" he asked softly. Thorne wanted to say no, wanted to push herself up and walk away with whatever dignity she had left. But her body betrayed her. A sob escaped her throat, raw and broken, and once it started she couldn't stop it. All the fear and pain and exhaustion came pouring out in waves. She cried like she hadn't cried in years, and this stranger just knelt there in the rain beside her, waiting. When she finally caught her breath, he spoke again. "My name is Caspian Hale," he said, "and I'm going to help you." Thorne didn't know why she believed him. Maybe it was the way he said it, not like a promise, but like a simple fact. Or maybe she was just too broken to argue anymore. Either way, when he helped her to her feet, she let him. When he guided her toward the sleek black car idling at the curb, she followed. And when he opened the back door and she saw the soft leather seats and the warm golden light inside, something in her chest cracked wide open. She'd forgotten what kindness looked like. The drive to the hospital was quiet. Caspian sat in the front passenger seat while a driver she hadn't even noticed before handled the wheel. Thorne pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the city blur past. Every part of her hurt. Her head throbbed where it had hit the wall. Her hands stung from the concrete. Her ribs ached from where one of the men had grabbed her. But somehow, sitting in this car, wrapped in warmth and silence, the pain felt distant, manageable. "You don't have to do this," she said finally, her voice hoarse. Caspian turned slightly in his seat, just enough that she could see his profile. "Do what?" "Any of this. Help me." You don't even know me." He was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "That's true. But I know what I saw, and I know what kind of person stands up to 3 men when most people would freeze or run." He paused. "You're stronger than you think." Thorne laughed, but it came out bitter and hollow. "I'm not strong. I'm just tired of being afraid." "That's the same thing," he said simply. The hospital was bright and clean and smelled like antiseptic. A nurse took Thorne back almost immediately, probably because Caspian made a phone call and suddenly everyone was moving with urgency. They cleaned her wounds, checked her head for a concussion, wrapped her scraped palms in bandages. Through it all, Caspian waited in the hallway. She could see him through the gap in the curtain, standing perfectly still with his hands in his pockets, looking like he had all the time in the world. When the doctor finally cleared her to leave, she found Caspian exactly where she'd left him. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression softened, just barely, but enough that she noticed. "They said you'll be fine," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yeah." Thorne wrapped her arms around herself. The hospital had given her a blanket, but she still felt cold. "Thank you. For everything." "I can take a bus from here?" "No," Caspian said firmly. "You can't," she blinked. "Excuse me. It's 2 in the morning. You're injured, and those men might still be out there." He gestured toward the exit. "I'm taking you home. No arguments." Thorne wanted to argue anyway, wanted to tell him she didn't need his charity, that she'd been taking care of herself for years, but the words stuck in her throat. Because the truth was, she was terrified of going back out there alone, of walking those dark streets by herself, of facing her empty apartment and all the problems waiting for her inside. So she nodded, and she followed him back to the car. Her apartment building looked worse in the middle of the night than it did during the day. The flickering streetlight cast strange shadows across the cracked facade, and the front door hung slightly crooked on its hinges. Thorne felt a flash of shame as they pulled up to the curb. This was her life. This was what she'd fought so hard to keep. And seeing it through Caspian's eyes, through the eyes of someone who clearly lived in a completely different world, made it all seem smaller and sadder than ever. "You don't have to walk me up," she said. Quickly, Caspian was already opening his door. "Yes, I do." They climbed the stairs in silence. Thorne's keys jingled in her shaking hands as she unlocked her door. The apartment was just as she'd left it, cramped and cluttered, with clothes draped over the single chair and dishes stacked in the tiny sink. Bills covered the small table by the window. A stack of past-due notices sat on top. Red letters screaming words like "final warning" and "immediate action required." Caspian stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Thorne waited for judgment, for pity, for anything that would make this moment even worse. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. "How long have you been living like this?" 3 years, she said quietly. "Since my parents died. I dropped out of college to pay for the funeral. Couldn't get financial aid anymore. Couldn't afford to go back. So I've been working, trying to survive. And these?" He gestured to the bills. Thorne's throat tightened. "Rent. Medical bills from when I got sick last year. Credit cards I maxed out just trying to eat." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I'm drowning. And tonight was just one more thing. One more reminder that no matter how hard I fight, I'm never going to get ahead." Caspian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. It was brief, just a few quiet words she couldn't quite hear. When he hung up, he looked at her with those pale gray eyes. "How much do you owe?" Thorne stared at him. "What?" "Total, all of it." "How much?" Her hands twisted in the blanket. I mean, it's not your problem, but how much?" he repeated, and there was steel in his voice now. $43,000. She whispered. Saying it out loud made her feel sick. "Give or take." Caspian nodded once, like she'd just told him the time. Then he made another call. This one was longer, and she could hear him clearly now. He was giving someone instructions. Account numbers, payment amounts, her address. When he hung up, he slipped his phone back into his pocket and looked at her. It's done, he said simply. Thorne's brain couldn't process what she was hearing. What's done? Your debts? They're paid. All of them. Rent's covered for the next year. I've also set up an account in your name with enough money to cover living expenses while you figure out what you want to do next. The room spun. Thorne grabbed the back of the chair to steady herself. You can't. Why would you? I don't understand. Caspian stepped further into the room, and when he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, almost vulnerable. My sister was attacked 5 years ago. 3 men just like tonight. But she didn't fight back. She froze. And by the time someone found her, it was too late. He paused, and Thorne could see the pain etched into his face. I wasn't there. I couldn't save her. But tonight I could save you. And I think that has to mean something. Tears streamed down Thorne's face again. I'm so sorry. Don't be sorry, he said. Be angry, be fierce. Be exactly what you were tonight. The world needs more people like you, people who fight even when the odds are impossible. People who refuse to break. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, setting it on the table. This is my assistant's number. Call her tomorrow. We're going to talk about getting you back into school, or finding you a job that actually values what you bring to the table. But tonight you need to rest. He turned to leave, but Thorne's voice stopped him. Why are you doing this, really? Caspian looked back at her, and for the first time he smiled. It was small and sad and real. Because someone should have done it for my sister. Because you deserve better than this. And because sometimes the universe gives you a chance to make something right. He opened the door. Good night, Thorne. Lock this behind me. Then he was gone. Thorne stood in the center of her tiny apartment, surrounded by bills that didn't matter anymore, holding a business card that felt like a key to a different life. She thought about the men who'd attacked her, about the fear that had nearly swallowed her whole, about the stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. And for the first time in 3 years, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. She walked to the window and looked out at the sleeping city. The rain had stopped, and the first hints of dawn were touching the horizon. A new day, a new beginning. She pressed her bandaged hand against the glass and whispered into the quiet. Thank you. Somewhere out there, in a car driving through the empty streets, Caspian Hale heard his phone buzz. A message from his assistant confirming that all the transfers had gone through. He read it, then looked out his own window at the same dawn breaking over the city. You're welcome, he said softly. And for the first time since his sister died, he felt like maybe he'd done something that mattered. Sometimes the darkest nights lead to the brightest dawn, and sometimes a stranger's kindness changes everything. Thorne thought she was alone in her fight, drowning in debt and despair, but fate had other plans. In a single night, she went from broken on the pavement to breathing hope again, proof that one person's compassion can rewrite another's destiny. The attack should have destroyed her, but instead it revealed her unbreakable strength and brought her face to face with someone who saw her worth when no one else did. From a rain-soaked alley to a life transformed, Thorne's story reminds us that our lowest moments can become our greatest turning points. Her fight didn't end in that alley. It was just beginning, and this time she wasn't facing the world alone. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs hope today. Drop a comment below telling us what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss powerful stories like this. Thank you for watching. Together we can spread messages of strength, hope, and the belief that tomorrow can always be better than today.